Hi, thanks a lot for watching this. I'm, I suppose, just trying to get it out as quickly as I could to you. Just, there's been a good bit of uncertainty around the course, and these sample papers then I think should hopefully really kind of help reduce a lot of that. I think they're very positive overall just from looking at them and how the learning outcomes have been interpreted in them. I think hopefully after watching this, if you're a bit worried, that I'd say there should be a bit less worry anyway about it, because just based on initial reaction to it anyway, they seem to have stuck very closely to what they said, or what they said the learning outcomes were, which I think is a great sign then for us to kind of get ready for the new course in a few months' time. So I suppose just to introduce, so the reason that I'm able to give this webinar and able to kind of analyze the papers so quickly and kind of get them up to you is because I've been writing back in business, and I've kind of been probably spending too long, too unhealthy amount of time with the specifications. So, and then combined with that, I've also taken a career break to do this. So I'm getting a few different questions in from teachers, like, and the response has been overwhelming. It's amazing. Like, thanks so much for all the feedback, and great that so many schools are on board. It's brilliant. Just around self-publishing, and if they can order, because I'm self-publishing. So I suppose the idea is that I'm a publisher publishing it rather than self-publishing. So it's fully available as per any other book from any other publisher. So it just means that I've taken on kind of ownership and project management of it, and it's just to kind of get much more control over it, because I just have this idea and vision for an ongoing support being available, and rather than just write the book and then just put it up there with all the resources, that I would actually just continuously work. So next year, I've been on career break to do this and kind of manage it all, and then next year I won't be returning to the class full time at all, so that I'll be able to continue going. So if you've been using the weekly revision packs, I'll be providing weekly ongoing resources for the book. And I suppose just to make that feasible, then the big thing is then that going forward for the new course, almost all of the content that I make and the weekly resources and everything that I'm doing for all the projects will be just exclusively for back in business users. So schools that have it listed on the book list will get access to everything. So in terms of the teacher platform is only going to be available for teachers in schools that are using back in business. I'll obviously keep Gavin Duffy Business going. I really like sharing resources. I've been doing it years, and really enjoy getting feedback that it's useful, and just love the idea of kind of making teachers' lives easier when we're so busy and stuff. So there'll be freemium versions or whatever. There'll be lots of different content for the current course anyway, but going forward for the new course, most of it is going to be for back in business users only. So if you like using my resources the whole time, and then you like kind of what you see tonight, you want more of it, like, so when the project is announced in September, I'm going to be available full time to just work on getting samples up, getting webinars going, hosting different events to try and just, I suppose, help teachers get through this new course and kind of the transition over. So that's pretty much it. So I suppose, yeah, and if you really like all the resources and the book, and you're going for it, I suppose the only thing I don't have is probably sales reps on the ground trying to sell it. So any word of mouth is great just to get, if you're talking to any other business teachers in other schools and stuff, that'd be all I'd ask if you enjoy it, and there's no pressure to it at all anyway. But essentially though, if you want way more of this, what I'm doing here, ongoing weekly resources. Every month I'm going to be adding different features. Like, there are going to be schemes of work, downloadable PowerPoints, all that good stuff that you'd normally expect with a book. Plus, from next year, every week you'll get, along with the scheme of work, you're going to get weekly resources produced specifically for the scheme of work, so that essentially I just want you to be able to show up and teach, and have all the resources that you need in a really easy to access place, just so that you can do the enjoyable part, and you're not just stuck making lots of resources, and we don't have hundreds of teachers making all different resources by themselves, and we can kind of get them in one place. So that's the idea behind it anyway. So and then in terms of teacher samples, again, I'm getting lots of different emails in. When can we get some teacher samples? The book isn't printed yet. The whole idea, I suppose, of what I'm doing is that I was delaying for these exam papers to come out, the sample papers, so that I could see how the learning outcomes were structured, and I'm going to be adjusting it now, and then building in the approaching exam features. I'll show you an example of one on this later, and the back chapter questions, to make it just as relevant and as close to the spec as possible as I could. So teacher samples, so the book will be printed in June, and I'll have the full ebook available before that, whenever I'm finished it. In all the samples I'm sharing, it hasn't gone through the final proof, so there's small little errors or stuff that might change. Plus I'll be going back and amending stuff where I feel that, now that I've seen how the learning outcomes seem to be interpreted, I just want to go back and add stuff in if I was a bit light, or take stuff out if I feel now that it's actually not necessary based on how it came up. So when I have it printed, there won't be any teachers' copies available for anyone who isn't using it in their school. I just have brochure and online digital samples for that. But anyone who is using it, then I'll be sending out teachers' copies to you, to your school. It'll be in June, or whenever I have them to hand, I'll get them out straight away to schools. Okay, so anyway, let's jump on. Okay, so the most common questions I suppose I got, because I was asking for a bit of feedback before this, was how much of the old course is gone. So I'd say, just to start there, like the old course is gone, so it's a new course rather than the old course changed a bit, as far as I can tell anyway from these. Like, they seem to have just stuck very much with what the learning outcomes are of the new course. So I wouldn't probably approach it in the mindset that it's the old course and it's just changed a bit. It very much seems like it is a new course. So I'm just going to get rid of the top of that there on the display. That's my take anyway initially. So I suppose with anything, like, this is just my initial kind of gut reaction, and the main thing I wanted to give you was an analysis of the papers, how the strands come up, what the papers look like, and just a bit of an interpretation, and I suppose just prevent you from having to spend some of your Easter going through and analysing it all, or putting it into a place. So I was trying to break it down for you, but my initial response anyway, just from looking at it, is that it's very much the new learning outcomes, or the new course, and that's probably what we really need to focus on. And there's a good bit of new stuff, and it's applied differently, and there is some old content, but it probably has to be approached differently or tweaked differently, just depending on how the new learning outcome phrases it. And we'll kind of dig into as much of that as we can. How to approach answering each question. So that's the outcome verbs, like your evaluates, explains and stuff. Outline was the most popular one. I'll give you a breakdown of them, and I'll give you some examples of how I would approach the different verbs, just based on having gone through, producing the book, and also then engaging with the specification. There is learning outcomes in it, and I'll give you some kind of samples with it. And another thing was the lack of marks on the paper. How do you know how much you write? I personally just haven't looked at it. Wouldn't be too concerned. I mean, they give you answer space with it, and I know from economics and stuff we've been dealing with it, and it hasn't actually been that big an issue, I don't think, for users. That in a lot of places they've asked for, like, give 2 points, give 4 points and stuff like that. So there is it doesn't seem to be too bad with that. Like, we do know how many marks to our overall, but then lots of questions have different parts to them. And then scheme work, suggested teaching sequence. Yeah, so definitely I'll have a scheme work out soon enough, and we'll share it on, and then I'll add those with different samples. There is sample resources up there in the teachers resources page, like PowerPoints and different things, but definitely suggested teaching sequence. I'll also update though, because in January when they bring out the investigative study, it may need to be adjusted. So I'm going to adjust the scheme work, but as I said earlier, I'll have a scheme work running, and then I'll be delivering additional resources to match that scheme work kind of over the year. So like that, it's kind of, if you just follow it, you'll then get like fresh kind of articles, work packs, additional stuff that are based on it. And the project, yeah. So the scope of tonight is not the project at all, or this recording isn't the project at all. But when the project's out, there'll be loads on it. So if you're worried about that, I'll have loads of videos similar to this. I'll be analysing and offering exemplars, breaking down sample answers, lots of videos that you can play in class. On the digital platform, there'll be lots of videos that students could play, so that they're not just taking up a lot of your time. Like, stuff like sourcing and referencing different things like that shouldn't be something that you probably have to deal with in class an awful lot, when it's something that a student can just go and read a bit in the book, and then watch a how-to video and just be able to do it. So one of the questions, I'm re-recording this today from last night. One of the questions last night was, is there going to be project material in the activity book? Yeah, so the unifying strand, we'll see a bit later, has appeared in the ordinary level papers as a question, and the so it actually it pretty much needs to be done like covered in class, almost like a topic. It didn't appear in the higher level questions, but the project is common to both levels, and they both have to do it. But the research project, there'll be a project planner and everything included in the activity book. The activity book now is going to be questions very similar to the sample papers that I'm going to build out, and then there'll be digital solutions as well to show. If you use Down to Business, I had an activity book with sample answers in it that kind of mirror it. So the page looks the exact same in the workbook, and then in the digital solution that you can show on the projector, it's the exact same. So it'll be answered in the answer space like a student, with kind of marks around it, and there was great feedback on that. So that will be the case again for this then. So but in that activity book there'll be space for them to write in a project planner, and then in the textbook then the unifying strand basically covers all the stuff for the project, so they'll be able to use those hand in hand. In my samples on the unifying strand, if you look at them, there's these things called take-home points, and they're the main things that I think students just need to make sure that they're doing. So it's nearly like a checklist built in. So I'll explain, like say, the reason to use a range of sources. That got asked in one of the ordinary levels. So like, checking, or checking the validity of sources, like that they're not biased, they're not out of date, that it's a big enough sample size, stuff like that. So then I have put in take home points in the unifying strand, so that they summarize that page. So for students, they can read about it, but then they'll have this little take home point at the end. Make sure you include three sources of data, so that you can show that you've taken perspectives from different viewpoints, or that you have a range of sources to verify that the information is accurate, stuff like that. So what do the sample papers change? I suppose that's the biggest thing that I suppose to take. Having looked at the sample papers, how have I changed my thinking, given I've been thinking about it for a good while and using it the whole time? So I think the biggest thing is that, like, really just have to look at like exactly what the learning outcome is. So my take from it anyway is that the way the learning outcome is phrased really does transfer over to the way the question was asked in these sample papers, and they are only sample papers, so we can only take as much from it as we can with that. But I think that's really it. So if we just look at this for a second, I'll show you what I will do now, given I have this information. I suppose this is why I was waiting for it. I identified the competencies of innovators. Okay, so that's like our entrepreneurial skills and characteristics from our old course. Okay, so identify is a verb that we see kind of in the sample papers, and identify means like be able to pick out from a range of ideas, or from a case study or story. Okay, so you could have a case where it's kind of similar to our ABQ here, that we have John and Jenny who set up a business, and it talks about how they're risk takers and stuff like that, and you might have to identify it from the case study. So I'd envision that being something definitely. And then, but the big thing here is, right, so that's kind of what we're used to kind of doing at the moment, and it's like, your reality perception, risk taker. The big thing, having seen the paper and kind of gone through what the learning outcome looks like and how the question is asked, I really think it's significant how the learning outcome is actually phrased. So it's outline why these are significant when starting a business. Okay, so this here is just probably a different take on. So when I was saying it's a new course rather than the old course, like, it's some of the old course I think will be tweaked. So it's going to be similar information but asked differently or presented differently. Like, initially that's the take anyway. Because why these are significant, so it's nearly like the importance of them, like why do they matter. So what I'm going to do then is take out my toolkit and go through it. So I'll review each chapter and enhance it to make sure I'm really looking at that. So I just wanted to wait so that I could see what I've written, to then see how it's interpreted, so then I can go back and change it if I want to. And this would be an example of how I would change it. Okay, so like, outline why they're significant. Okay, so that's the bit there that maybe when I had put this together then, like now I appreciate that it's very likely that's going to be the way the question is going to be phrased. So therefore I would adjust it to make sure the last sentence in each of the points I'm making then definitely has that. So when we have a look at, this was what was in currently, being realistic, innovators have a good reality perception. Okay, so like, this is all good stuff for where we normally are. They have the ability to see situations as they really are, and not how they would like them to be, so they can make better decisions without bias. Okay, so now like this here is, I would imagine this is probably solid enough, because we have, like, why is it significant? They can make better decisions without bias. But I suppose it's this bit here as well, like when starting a business, like they might ask. So I think what we need to get rewritten in here is something about when you're starting a business. So I think in the sample, this is just the structure of it here. Like, so we might have something like being realistic, so kind of what we're used to with our state. Our expand here, innovative, see how situations are, not how they'd likely to be. So that's kind of our state and explain that we're kind of used to. But then I would say you'd want to just bring in, or get the students to bring in then why they're significant when starting a business, why they're important when you're starting a business. And we can see it's significant because it'll help them make practical decisions based on facts, not wishful thinking, so they're more likely to make the right decisions each time. Or I'd say even on reflection there, the right decisions when starting, link it back to when starting up or when deciding where to locate. I would definitely link here to like the startup. I just wanted to get the idea of the structure behind it. So I would say here like the significance of it. So I'd imagine that you could probably blend these together, but just given how they seem to be asked, I would be thinking that they will ask it very, very closely to the learning outcome if they're following the trend that they've set with these sample papers. So I would say just making sure that you really focus on each learning outcomes. From my take on it anyways, learning outcomes are the thing that matters the most. And so very, very happily I've gone with learning outcomes as how I've structured the whole book. So like each learning outcome starts at the top of a fresh page, and I've tried to kind of stay as close to those learning outcomes as possible the whole way through it. And now all I'll do is then go back and look at what I wrote and just see, can I adjust that? Like, is there a way that the questions have been asked that would make me just want to change something the way I've written it? And in some cases I think it would be giving more points for like benefits at local level or national level. Like those would be the things that in hindsight, now I haven't seen the papers, I'll probably have to go back and just adjust a little bit. So all the samples that you see up are just samples, and there might be some amendments to it, but they're there so you can see the style, layout, design, and the real kind of clear, all the content, and then all your reflection and research sections kind of separate, stuff like that. Okay, so I think they will make a difference, and I think that's what I mean. I think this is really positive. Like to have these sample papers out now is just brilliant. Like where for Leaving Cert Economics, they were much later, and there was a lot more uncertainty like till much later. So I think having these is great, and I actually think from going through them initially, they're very good. Like they're very fair. Like they're kind of fair enough use of the learning outcomes, and I think they make it much more certain. So I know generally when there's a new course, people probably feel that it's going to be trouble for a while for it to bed down. I think getting these early, having so many of them that are so specific and clear, is brilliant. Now the only downside to that is when we look at the structure of the paper here, every student's going to have to know every single learning outcome based on the sample papers anyway, because they just come up blended across the place. So I would say the course is now over 100 specific different learning outcomes. In lots of cases that could be a page to 2 pages long, and none of the questions had a learning outcome blended together within the actual question. So in A, part 1 and part 2 were different, they're different, or A and a B and a C, they're all different, but within an actual question none of them were the same. So I would nearly be treating each different learning outcome like just a different chunk that they need. So like there would be nothing wrong with, for example, giving them an exam on specific learning outcomes. So you might say, right, chapter 3 learning outcomes number 3, 4 and 5, and chapter 4 learning outcomes number 1, 2 and 3, we'll have a test on them tomorrow, because ultimately they're just, it's really nicely chunked and really clear for the student then which bit you're engaging with at the moment, and then how it's likely to be asked. So that's the real positives. The only drawback is, it looks like the ABQ is still there if you didn't really like them. I'd say it'll be different though, just kind of the initial take on it. But the ABQs were 90 marks. I'll just go into that quickly here. So the ABQs were 90 marks, and then you have 3 long questions at 70 marks each. So overall we're at 300 marks for the paper, and it's a 2.5 hour exam. So I'd say the case study, there's a lot in it. It looked pretty wordy and kind of more intermingled. I suppose I'll leave it actually, come back to it, but so it's 3 out of 4 long questions, and in the ABQ, even in the higher level sample paper 2, there's the 4 different strands are mentioned in it, so it doesn't look like it's currently as it is, where when unit 2, 3 and 4 are up, students might be able to kind of ditch unit 6 and 7 and be able to focus in on that. It does look like they have to cover everything, but I think just on the initial way that they've been phrased, it does look like the learning outcomes are the learning outcomes, and that's pretty much what they're going to ask it, and they're not going to stray too far off the beaten track at all. So but anyway, I put this together for you to decide that. Like, that's just my take. I'm not saying that I'm right or whatever. I'm just trying to kind of help clarify your thoughts on it and provide you with the data so that you can kind of make a decision on it then as well yourself. So how I've laid this out just to show you here is strand and chapter over here. So you can see this is like, sorry, where is it there? Ooh, sorry, strand one. I'm just gonna have to, sorry, move this over a little bit. Actually, I'll get rid of me there for a sec. Okay, yeah, so here then we have strand 1, chapter 2, strand 3, chapter 4, strand 3, chapter 13. So that's telling you what chapter it is and what strand it is. So we've kind of our 4 strands, and then within each chapter and strand, there's different learning outcomes. So you can see here, this is chapter 2, so 2.1 is 2 is chapter 2, and point 1 is the first learning outcome in chapter 2. So how I've laid out the book, and I think it will be very useful now the way the exam's been laid out, is that each chapter goes in line with the specification. So if you're looking at the specification, what they're supposed to learn, the learning intention, the learning outcomes, the book flows like that. So chapter 1, strand 1 is what's the first chapter in the specification for it as well. And in the spec then they've listed the learning outcomes in a row, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for each chapter. Some chapters have way more, like there's a chapter that's 15 in it, so some are bigger than others, but like that, some of the learning outcomes seem quite small, like they could be covered in a half a page or a page, I'd say. So sticking very closely to those learning outcomes, I think, will be the best course of action for you approaching the exam, because when you see the papers, every single question is linked it's married really closely to a learning outcome. So going at those learning outcomes seems to be the way to go about this anyway from this so far. Let's just have a look there with this. Okay, so so with this then it's 2.1. Okay, so this is the chapter. So what I want to really look at is the learning outcome versus the question that was asked for it. Okay, so let's look at this learning outcome over here and just see if we can see like what they might be thinking when they're doing this. Distinguish between public, private and not-for-profit enterprises and analyze the contribution of each of these types of enterprise both locally and nationally. Okay, and then we have outline one way project 1 contributes to the local economy. So it's contribution to the local economy. Okay, so and project 1 then is a private enterprise. So it seems a very, very clear link there. Like, what do private businesses do? Like, they create jobs, stuff like that. Okay, I would say here definitely that, knowing anytime the learning outcome mentions to the consumer, to the business, to the economy, it seems clear that you'll need to know a couple for each of them, rather than just one, because of the way stuff gets asked. And similarly here for local and nationally, I would definitely know a couple for each of them, if they're in the learning outcomes like that. Okay, so let's have a look here. Identify the opportunities and challenges associated with remote and blended working arrangements for both employees and employers. So again, you'd need to know a couple for both of those, and they might ask them either way. Identify 3 challenges for project 1 with the current working arrangements. So you have to identify, so you'd have to pick out of that case study, what problems they're having because people are working remotely. Okay, so let me just back up for a sec. The way I've laid this out here is question 1, all the different parts to it. So you have, A, B, C, D, and E, and then I think they're part 1 and part 2 for it. So question 1 is the ABQ now. Okay, so for the ABQ then you can see there was green, blue and orange along the side. So there was 3 strands in the ABQ out of 4. So it covers across the course. So for the ABQ then, it's going to be a case where you're probably going to have to apply your knowledge, like, kind of like our state explain, direct quote type thing, or state explain, relate to the text with that. But all I want to do here just for this run through is just show you how the learning outcome and the question seem to be very, very closely related. And then I'll go through, I'll show you we'll break down actual sample answers, or have a look at how I think you might go about approaching different answers in a little bit, okay? So analyze the significance of organizational culture and innovation in successful organizations. So analyze the significance, so that's kind of similar to the enterprise thing that we're saying there. So like, what's the importance of it? Like, what's the importance of it? So 3 ways that Project 1's organizational culture has contributed to the success. So that there is pretty much that there, like, they're the same. So like, the learning outcome there, the question, very, very similar. Outline design thinking as an innovative approach to idea development, and appreciate how the process is iterative and both solution and person centered. Okay, so that's something new. So the design thinking is the new 7 stages in the product development, your idea generation, your product screen and concept development, that thing. Design thinking seems to be the new version of that, where it's phases, so they would have to be in order, and it's how business come up with stuff. And iterative gets mentioned at one point. It gets asked, what is that? So it's the process of doing something over and over again and refining it until you're happy. So like creating a prototype, testing how it works, getting feedback, changing it, adjusting it, testing how it works, getting feedback, and going over and over again. So iterative means that you repeatedly refine something until you're happy with it. Okay. And design thinking there has 4 phases. But if we just look at this, outline how project 1 can use each of the 4 phases of design thinking to successfully meet Glowing's expectations. So it's pretty much this, how it's an innovative approach. So it's just know the 4 stages and you're good. Okay, demonstrate an understanding of the importance of identifying competition in the market. Okay, so that seems to be something kind of, demonstrate an understanding. So that means show an example or work an example or apply it. And identify Glowing's potential competitive advantage, and based on this, recommend the strategy. So it's kind of tied in with that. Porters is new as well, but just all I'm trying to do, I'm probably not trying to teach all the new content or whatever. I'm just trying to show you how the learning outcome potentially connects to the question. To identify and analyze competition in the market and use these findings to identify the competitive advantage of a business. So analyze the competitive forces in the market using Porter's 5 force model. So that there is, they connect very, very nicely, So if you were just to cover that learning outcome well, the 5 force model, and you know how it identifies and analyzes competition, and then how it can find a competitive advantage, you'll be able to answer that very well. Okay, and that shouldn't take up too much time. It doesn't seem like there's massive depth needed in that. You just need to know what they are, what will be included in them, and then to be able to apply it to the case study there. Okay, demonstrate stakeholder interactions and conflicts, and then outline the importance of growing your relationship with our suppliers. So here, with each learning outcome, there's also a learning intention where they tell you like what the student should be learning about, and within that then they talked about the importance of them. So that's referenced there. So it seems to be why are suppliers important, to the business. So I'd imagine there it'd be about like getting quality stock, and if it's the importance of it, how does the business benefit from that? Customers will be much happier. Our customer satisfaction will increase because the quality of stock received from the supplier is better than competitors, or can give a competitor's edge, something like that. So it'd be more in line with what you're getting out of the supplier rather than just saying what a supplier is. I'd say for that, which is probably new enough because we weren't really asked that. We were just asked about the win-lose type thing. So I would say there, that's something there that probably needs to be adjusted then from the old course. Like, what's the benefit of a trade union or whatever it is, or what's the importance of them, or how do they interact with a business? And so it might be like easier to negotiate pay rises with all staff at the same time, or easier to get feedback on industrial issues so that you can improve working conditions to prevent further action or keep staff happy, something like that. So trying to just rethink about the stuff that we already know from the old course and how the new learning outcome maybe interprets that. So identify the competencies of innovators and outlines why they're significant. So I was talking about that earlier, and this here you had to identify 4 key competencies such as Grania Mullins possess. So that's kind of similar to what we're used to at the moment, where they say such as a business, and in that case then you don't have to necessarily talk about Grania. So this wasn't an ABQ question, it's question 2. So I keep calling it the ABQ, by the way. It's called question 1. The ABQ isn't written anywhere, so it's called question 1 anyway, but I just refer to it until we're used to it probably as the ABQ, just so you kind of know. But you just have to pick out, identify seems very, very brief. It's one of those that it seems like a sentence at most. You can see there, sorry, when I was copying and pasted over, it leaves out TI in some places, so you'll notice that some words are missing that. I tried to get all of them. But identify and compare a number of technology-driven business models and outline the key characteristics of each model. Okay, so this is new then. So a business model is ultimately how the business operates. Like, so YouTube's business model was advertising. Like they ultimately give loads of free stuff on their platform, and then they expose you to ads so that they can get paid. Okay, so that they pick up lots of money, and then they encourage their people to produce stuff so that they can get paid. So it incentivizes more content and stuff as well. So different business model like Strava, loads you probably use. The fitness one is like a subscription based, so you pay subscription again. It's a premium type model where you get users in with free content, and then you limit and restrict some of the content, some of the good stuff and features, so that people would upskill to premium, and then be on a subscription basis. And or Spotify is your other example of that. So here they specifically reference crowdfunding, and they're picked out in the specs. There's a handful that they specifically mention. So if you cover them, I'd say you'd be generally covered to begin with anyway for it. But crowdfunding, so like knowing that it's a community based thing, like that people can raise money by through their target market. It can be used like the key characteristics, I suppose, of it are kind of nearly like the benefits of it as well, but it can be used to check if a product's feasible. So using a GoFundMe means that a business can see if people actually want it before they have to produce it, just by getting people to buy it before it's produced. That's the idea behind it. So the other big characteristic is you're raising finance from a number of different sources, or from your target market, and it's community driven. And there's a great bit of marketing in it, rather than raising money directly from a bank, or having to apply for a bank loan. Okay, and then explain two key characteristics of each of the following. So the subscription and the advertising model. So I was kind of talking about that there. Subscription is your Spotify, your Strava, advertising, your YouTube as well. Okay, so knowing a couple of key characteristics of those, where they make the money from, how they operate, how they give value to the customer, etc. Outline the factors you considered when trading internationally. Outline 3 factors Gras Chocolates should consider before expanding into international market. So really kind of clear connection there with that. And also with the business models, like the key characteristics of each model, and that's essentially what you get asked here, key characteristics of each model. Explain how economic indicators can impact on business development and growth. Explain the impact of 3 economic indicators on business growth. So like what we are seeing here is that the learning outcome is the question. And some of them then they'll be asked differently obviously as well, but it seems to be very, very closely married, which I think is really, it's great for certainty in terms of like, if you stick close to those learning outcomes and really kind of focus on them, I think the course I think is smaller than it feels like, because it's we feel like we've got lots of the old stuff and now we've loads more new stuff. I think just the way they've interpreted it, like going that as your starting point to just make sure you're getting those learning outcomes, should really give a lot of certainty as to how stuff could get asked, because I feel like that the way they've interpreted it there, if they continue to do that, I think we're in a very good position to kind of know what we should be teaching in lots of different places. So I see these papers having them this early and then being this clearly linked to the learning outcomes as a really, really positive. Like I think it's a great thing once we get used to it. Obviously there's lots of new content there, and content I'm talking about crowdfunding and different things that porters and stuff like, but that's just new content and the students won't know any different. So it's new for them as well. So I think we'll get used to that, but it's more just the worry of how they might ask stuff, I think, is taken away when we've seen this, or certainly reduced anyway. And you can see here, so with economic indicators, like they mention a couple in the spec, like your inflation, exchange rates and stuff like that, but then they also mention the consumer confidence index or consumer sentiment index. So that would be a new thing that a lot maybe mightn't have thought before, but it's very good. It's really loads of real good articles on it. And the credit union is the one that is used in Ireland, and they break it down, I think it's each month, and have different articles on why it would go up or down. So there's loads of good engaging articles and relevant kind of analysis that you can kind of use in class. But with it, if we just look again, like I suppose the main thing here is they've linked it very much to business development and growth. So you just need to make sure then, like, it doesn't seem like you'll have to do a whole lot with each economic indicator besides be able to explain what it is, like, what is inflation, what's exchange rates, whatever, but then how does it impact on business development and growth? So, if inflation increases, X, Y, Z happens, this impacts on growth because of whatever, like, so I'd imagine, say, like this here, explain the impact of 3 economic indicators. Like, I'd be imagining then you like when we're talking about the impact, when I'm teaching students there, impact is always something going up or going down. So, higher, like increased or decreased, whatever. So if you're talking about an economic indicator, let's go with inflation. So we're saying like increased inflation, and that's going to be our kind of our state bit there. Increased inflation, how this impacts on a business. So increased inflation is going to impact on business costs, because a business will have to pay more for raw materials and stock. Full stop. So that's the impact on the business stated. Then we need to explain then what impact this has on business growth. So there I would be looking to very much link it to business development and growth. Like, so business development and growth may be stunted or restricted from this, because if there's an increase in cost, there'll be a reduction in the profit margin a business has, or potentially a fall in sales because it's more expensive. And this may limit then the amount of retained earnings or reserves that they can have to fund expansion or to increase output. Or if demand is lower, they may be less likely to expand due to the lower demand. So linking it back to the kind of impact on development and growth, I think will be really, really important, especially because it's literally referenced in the question. So I would see that as a very important thing for that. Okay, and explain, when we look later on, they've left a bit more room in the answers for explain, so it looks like you do need to actually develop them out a little more. I think it says give a reason or a cause as well, where the verb outline there very much looks like you can just kind of get away with stating and explaining. Okay, and then something else new there, we have our ESG report. Identify the 3 elements of the ESG report, outline the 3 factors. So, same. Outline how a person's credit rating is established, the factors that can impact and the consequence of a poor credit rating. Outline 3 factors that can affect a person's credit rating. So, factors that can impact on credit rating, it's the same thing. So I think we can really see the pattern there, that the learning outcome is going to really dictate how you should approach, how a student should go about the course, which makes the most sense. And the fact there's loads of them, I don't think matters that much, because it seems like they're really kind of sticking to them very, very tightly. And if that's the case, then it just means that at least we have a kind of real clear focus, this is what you're supposed to be able to do after studying this bit. So investigate how digital technology impacts consumer behavior. Analyze 3 ways digital technology can influence consumer behavior. Okay, so I think we've seen the pattern there. I'll let you go and kind of have a look at it yourself and kind of dig into it more. But the other thing that I just wanted to show with this bit of analysis is the mixture. So we have strands 1, 2 and 3 in question 1, which is your ABQ type thing. In question 2 then, we have strand 1, strand 2 and strand 4. So we have this total blend of strands kind of in it, and then we have strand 1, a mixture, strand 3 in the next question, and strand 4, 2, 1 and 3. So we have a full house then in the last one then. So it doesn't seem like you could leave anything out. So literally students are gonna have to cover it looks like every single learning outcome. If they were to leave out a chapter, they do get asked in different questions. So where I think that there's an example of this here, 6 and 8, chapter 1, 2, 3, give us a look. I don't see there. So there's chapter 2 in the first question, and then there's chapter 2 in this question. So if they had left that out, they couldn't answer the full paper, so it doesn't look like it's kind of broken up the way that we're used to being broken up, with question 1 being unit 1. That seems to be gone. It looks very much like you're gonna have to cover everything. Anything can come up anywhere with anything, and there's no real pattern for it. But when they do come up, it seems very closely tied to what they tell you they're going to ask, and it also seems to, you can treat each learning outcome pretty much independently. So I suppose in that idea that you could teach one and then jump over to another and jump back to one, you don't necessarily need to use the book as a chapter in a row or go through a full chapter. So for kind of convenience sake, and so that it's just much easier to interpret, I left the book as each chapter is all the learning outcomes for that chapter, so it's really closely tied to the specification. It just means that some chapters will be bigger than others, but like that, you don't necessarily have to treat them like full chapters together. You can nearly do a half a chapter and then go and do another half, because all of the questions that you'll get, all the activity book stuff, will all be each different learning outcome. There'll be questions for that. There's no blending together. You won't get asked the two different. It doesn't look like, you haven't gotten asked 2 different learning outcomes in one question, so you can just treat them all kind of independently, which I think will end up being very handy when we get used to it. Okay, and then they're all the papers there. You can see with the ordinary level is just slightly different, that they have an extra long question. They do have an ABQ as well, an incredible amount of parts to it, 4, 8, 9 parts for their ABQ. So I mean, I really hope, if I was doing an exam, and what I just really would hope they would do is that when they have the case study, and then you're going leafing forward 3 pages, and then you've got your answer there, and you have to keep on leafing back. I hope that they give individual printed versions of the case study as well, separate, so that they can have that separate, and then actually within their booklet be answering it, and not having to leaf back and forth. It's one thing that I just really don't like in say the booklet versions of exams. But there's loads of parts anyway with the ordinary level, but you can see a total mix, and there's all 4 strands covered in that ABQ. So that's the kind of layout of it. Okay, so then what I've put on this, on the next pages, again, just for you, I won't spend much time here, is just a breakdown of each strand and chapter, and across each of the papers. So here we have the learning outcome. Okay, so that's your learning outcome. Here we have the higher level paper 1, higher level paper 2, and then the ordinary level paper 1 here. Okay, so I've just done this for you, just for your record, so you can see how stuff comes up. So you can see, like, say chapter 2 here came up in all 3 papers, and you can just compare across then how it gets asked in all 3 different papers. So I've just done that for each strand, again, just for handiness sake. I had only gotten ordinary level paper 1 done. I'll add in ordinary level paper 2, and you can come back and check this at another time if you want. So let's get into the verbs and what they might look like. So you can see here the use of the action verb. So a lot of the verbs that didn't get asked, like acknowledge, appraise, appreciate, assess, compare, determine, I've examined there twice for some reason, investigate, interpret, record, suggest. They appear to be like the research project part of the paper. And then there was other verbs that we use a lot. So you can see outline had 9, explain had 6, identify had 3, and our old friend discuss there had 2. Discuss, it just seems like they're leaving a bit more room for you to write stuff there as well, so it seems like you need a bit of development. And then we have evaluate as well, so we'll have a little look at the kind of interpretation of evaluate in that. But I think what you can see from that is that it seems to be like, the paper is one part of the course, and then your project's the other. And I suppose that's how I've approached structuring back in business as well. And I'll show you here. So, it's the paper is 60%, the project's 40%. And they seem to be very different things. Like the paper here is all based on the learning outcomes, and then your project is all based on your kind of research. And in terms of those action verbs, they've kept them very distinct and separate. Like, in most of those verbs for your research are kept separate to your verbs for the paper. So I would tend to treat them nearly like 2 different things. And what I was trying to do with that in the approach, with the layout of it, is structure it like that. So you can see just on a page. Okay, so how I structure the page then is like, this is learning outcome number 2 for this chapter, and this is your learning outcome. So it's really, really clear. Every single one of these is on the top of the page, so that when you open that page, you know why you're on the page. So I just find that's really helpful for a teacher and a student. It's what I would have done in my older book, and I find it just makes it really user friendly when a page starts. So I'd fill in, like, say, images down here in order to bump content so that the next learning outcome starts at the top on the next page. I'd be very conscious to do that, and I just feel as a user point of view, it'll just make it really, really, really handy. But ultimately, so the importance of ethics and sustainability when planning. So this is the importance of ethics and sustainability when planning. So this is what will be examinable. So I'd imagine if the student just knew that, they're covered. Like, that's them covered for their exam, because it's very much just literally following it. So importance, I can't say the word importance when I'm talking about leading their business without drawing arrows, because it's just what I tell my students over and over and over. Importance, to show something going up or down, to show how it's important, not just say what the important thing is. So for example, improved reputation rather than saying reputation. Okay, so increased compliance attracts talent and increased investment. So, like, the importance of it, you're getting that. And then essentially you want to say how this thing comes about because of ethics and sustainability in your planning. So that on that page then, like, that's your content. This is your Leaving Cert paper. Okay, and then over here, what I've done is I've put in like case studies and reflection stuff. So this over here is your project. So I just wanted it very clear when I was designing the book, and I love the design. I'm working with a publisher in Cork on it. The design team there just find amazing letter tech, and this was exactly kind of what I was looking for. I wanted the content to be really, really clear, so students studying by themselves in this class, they'd be able to handle it. A teacher teaching class knows exactly this is what's important for you to learn, and when a student is studying then this is exactly what can be asked on a test. You know, this here is the important stuff in the paper side of things, and then over here I just wanted it to be really separate then as an activity. This is what you're going to be doing for your project. Here, over here you'll research, you'll develop your key research skills, looking at different sources, looking at the limitations of data, questioning data, all the good stuff that you can do over the course of the year to really just bring on your project. And then similarly, as you're teaching it, like you can dip in and out of these as much as you want. So if it was a case that you wanted to leave some of the research, you don't have to do them at that time. They act like independent activities themselves as well, and there'll be pages to answer those within the activity book. So your reflecting research could be homework, like they could be doing that at home. You don't have to cover it in class. If you just wanted to get through content, deal with the white space over here, and if you wanted to get through some research stuff and have a more activity based class, deal with the business in our world case study over here. So that's how the book runs, and I think now, having seen the way the paper is, I'm really happy with that's a good way to go about it. So like for example here, business in our world, bit of a case study about Unilever and you know how they plan to cut plastic waste and stuff like that, and then time to reflect and research. So it's like gather further evidence, you know, how they become more sustainable and different things. So nice directed research, have them practicing going and searching for stuff. Do you think Unilever plans are a positive step for the company? Explain the impact of any action they're planning will have on two stakeholders. Justify the impact. So you're just getting them used to the idea that they'll have to go and gather information and then consider the information to form an opinion, like what is that impact? And then they will have to then justify it. So justifying is a big thing for your research. Giving an opinion, but backing it up with a bit of data to support it. So these activities are embedded to really develop those skills, and not have them feel like that they're doing a project or getting ready for the project. It's just research. So it'll become normalized for them totally, so that when it comes to doing it in sixth year, it'll just be something that they've done as part of studying business, and that's the idea behind them. Okay. So and you can see there, yeah, so like I was saying, the book needs to just go through the final proof. It's got number 3 written there or whatever, like, you know, all that then will be done when I'm doing all the amendments, just if you notice anything in it. It's not the finalized version of it. Okay, the ABQ is back. Okay, so let's have a look at it and potentially how it might get asked, you know, what we need to look for or what we know so far with this. I'm just going to move that, probably annoying you in the corner. Okay, so the ABQ is back yet. So it is 30% of the paper. Okay, so it's 90 marks out of 300, which is 30% of the paper, which works out as 18% when you factor in your project. So in and around the same, like the ABQ is 20% at the moment, so you know, pretty much the same amount to your grade. It's not called the ABQ though, it's just called question 1, and it's just called compulsory. Okay, the business world. Okay, the business world. So I was pretty close with what did I called our business in our world, so it wasn't too far off anyway. I only noticed that there. Okay, compulsory case study though, so you don't have a choice. So you can see there the layout of it. We are probably used to seeing our 3 paragraphs in a row and then 3 questions that link very closely to each paragraph. Initially, from just looking at this, and I haven't spent massive time in the ABQ because I was just spending lots of time in Excel kind of making those handouts look pretty, but from the ABQs themselves, like what I've noticed is there seems to be links throughout it to different questions. So some questions are chunked together, but it seems to be that different parts of it can either repeat a lot, like, you know, so this particular one here is all around, I'm not going to read it now or anything, but it's all around them being sustainable, and it's written there like 5 times in it. So it doesn't feel to me there then that you need to quote it directly, but more you need to relate to it. I don't know, that's my initial take on it, but I know certainly unless we get further guidance, if I'm teaching 6 years in 2 years time, I'm going to tell them to relate to it plus give a quote, like, you know, until we know more. I think that's kind of what you'd nearly need to do and follow it currently, but my feeling would be it'll be a bit different. Like, you know, at the moment when I teach the ABQ to my kids, I basically say, like, up here is your state and explain bit, and down here is our direct quote. Okay, and at the moment with the ABQ, they're quite separate things. Like your state and explain is your keywords, and then down here it's your link that's to the text, and then all that matters really at the moment is that this link here is relevant to your keywords. But about 3/4 of the marks are going to go for keywords, and 25% are going to go for you finding a link. So at the moment, like, with the ABQ, if I was going at it in a really like systematic way, I would just tell my students to read the question, figure out what the keywords are, because the keywords are going to be the thing that matters most. They're going to be worth the most amount of marks. So just say it's on the areas of a control for a business. I would try and get them to figure out, right, what are they again? Okay, they're credit, stock, quality. Okay, what are the keywords for that? ISO 9000, quality marks, inspection, stuff like that. And that's what's going to get you most of the marks in the current ABQ. And then I would then tell them, I would tell them to not bother really engaging with the story too much, because all you have to do is fish out sentences that relate to it. So I'd tell them then to go and find a sentence that has anything to do with getting a quality mark or doing sampling. And then when you plug that sentence out and put it in here, then you're up to H1. So my gut feeling would be that isn't the future of this question 1, because you're not fully applying anything, you're just putting the quote in. I would feel that it would be more that you have to engage with what's presented in the ABQ and apply it or interpret it a bit more with that. So you do in this case. Okay, so what I did, I had mentioned there the design team. So when these papers came out, the same day I got on after looking at it and got these pages mocked up. So like I think that's what's like really good about what I'm doing, that I'm just very adaptive and flexible, because it's just I'm free the whole time to basically do it and to go all in on it. And then they came up with this just as an idea around, like, this is what I'm going to be spending the next couple of weeks on, creating these approaching exam pages and features, so that throughout your study, now that we've seen the papers and we've a really good idea of maybe how to go about approaching them, these will be guides then that you can teach in class. If you did use my old book, there was videos that came with these as well. It was called Exam Focus, and it was around, when we knew that course so well, it was around how to approach different parts of that old course. Where with this then, I will be recording videos that you can play in class and use just to get an extra voice in the room. And I have a sample up on the website there under Teachers Resources for one of them. So I'll talk through what the verb is, what a student should probably look for when they're doing it, and then a sample answer kind of marking out what's likely to be good practice. And it's probably going to be a pretty solid place to start. We won't know for sure, we won't have marking schemes, but I suppose all I'm trying to do with this tonight and with everything is make reasoned assumptions based on spending time analysing the data and going through it. So it doesn't, you can come up with different interpretations, absolutely, but that's all I'm trying to do. So with this, right, with the approaching exam pages, if you haven't seen something similar in the samples, I'm going through different key verbs in different chapters so that all will be covered across the course. This here is straight from the spec, what it is. Recognize patterns, facts, or details, provide an answer from a number of possibilities, recognize and state briefly a distinguishing factor feature. So you can see here it's brief, or picking something out, okay, or else multiple choice. So all I've tried to do then in the student goal, so this here is just straight from the spec, and then I try and interpret that for the students. For this, you may get a scenario-based question in question 1, so that's our ABQ, that you need to read through and pick out the relevant pattern, factor, detail. Might also appear as a multiple choice question where you need to provide an answer from a number of choices given, or as an outright answer to a question as seen in sample paper 2, identify one trading block apart from the EU and Mercosur that is relevant to Irish business. So I'm trying to just explain for it, and I'll talk through that then, like say in the video if you were using it. But there are the number of different ways that identify comes up, and identify seems to be pick out. It doesn't seem to be like explain or expand or give the importance of or anything like that. Okay, and then this one here was recommend. So recommend I didn't see in the spec, so it's just the eco spec I pulled from. Put forward something with approval as being suitable for a particular purpose. So that certainly seems to be what recommend would be. And in that case then I kind of put forward this. For this, a good approach might be three-pronged, like put forward why, what you are recommending, how it can be implemented, and then explain how it's suitable for the purpose. Okay, so like what are you picking as an answer, how does it work, why is it the answer? That's pretty much kind of what we're looking at for recommend. What are you saying we should do, how does it work, and why is it appropriate? And if you went through that process, I think you're in a pretty good spot. So with that then, I took the sample question from that from the sample paper, and that's what I'll be using now for the rest of the book. So I'm making these for all of the different sample papers where they're appropriate and putting them in their appropriate question. So you can see here, this was the question: identify Glow's Inc.'s potential competitive advantage. So that's That's one part of the question. And based on this advantage, recommend an appropriate strategy for launching their new product to the market. Okay, and then here I just pulled out sample excerpts from it. So Project One has been an enviable reputation. The company's commitment to community engagement is also noteworthy. With the nail polish industry becoming increasingly saturated, they predict a growing demand for sustainable alternatives. A key hurdle will be sourcing unique, sustainable material, committed to delivery of high quality, innovative product, sustainability and originality, ability to combine innovation with environmental responsibility. Okay, so like I was saying, links galore there to like environmentally sustainable and innovative. So I don't think for me, it doesn't look like there'd be a quote needed with this type of question, the way it's questioned, but it does look like you need to engage with the case study and answer based on the case study and justify it from the case study. That would be my take, certainly, on this. And you can see that's what I've done here. So what the book then will show, now this was just mocked up. I might change some of the highlighted thing, but I think it makes sense anyway to have a look at and watch. So you can see here, identify their advantage based on the case study. Glow Inc.'s big advantage is their focus on innovation, producing sustainably friendly stuff. Okay, so step one, answer that bit. Then we have a recommend. Put forward what you were recommending. Okay, so you have to recommend how to launch. To launch, they should target their marketing mix to suit the target market of eco-conscious consumers. Okay, I'd say even there in the rewrite, I'll probably say here to suit the habits of their eco-conscious consumers. Okay, so like you're saying that they should think about how the eco-conscious consumers behave when they're making the marketing mix. So that's your proposed recommendation when you're launching the product. And then you look at state how this can be implemented. So how do you do that? What are the likely behaviors of an eco-conscious consumer or someone who's into sustainable stuff? They could do this by making sure their product are in health stores. So you're looking at one of your marketing mix there, the place. Using beauty influencers known for green promotion. I think those meant to say social influencers, I'm not sure, but anyway, and then advertising their USP on their social media or digital marketing as being sustainably sourced and ethically produced. So digital marketing there is like your MailChimp, your newsletter, Klaviyo type thing, where you have subscribed audience and you can send out newsletters and stuff. So using the different P's in the marketing mix and adjusting those P's based on your USP is kind of what we're saying here. And then explain how implementing it is suitable. So you want to say, why would that work? Okay, so targeting eco-conscious consumers this way will help build a reputation and ensure they're adapting their marketing mix to focus on the target market. I'd say there, I'll probably I was putting this together on the fly just to kind of show you how I will go about it. I might even adapt that there to just be a little bit more specific. So I would say there, using a social influencer who's already linked to sustainable practice means that they'll have lots of followers that are in their target market. So using this should help boost exposure to more people in their target market. Or the social being linked to a brand ambassador will encourage people who follow them to buy it because it's seen as verified or approved by that brand ambassador. Some kind of link to something specific I think could be a really, really strong answer. But the main thing I just wanted to show you there was the layout of that. So that's 2 pages in the book there on the approach in the exam. Generally they're 1 pages, but then for the ABQ then, and particularly because there was 2 verbs, it was just a bit bigger. But that's one of the kind of key features in the book. I think will be really useful now that we have the sample papers out, and I'll be able to put them together over the next while and insert them in. So if you've seen some of the samples at the moment, they're blank pages, and that's just because I was waiting for the papers for that. Okay, so let's just have a look. This is the structure then of the book, and kind of I just want to show how I think it works well then with the sample papers. Chapter snapshot is just your kind of straightforward introduction. Some of the name a few businesses, name kind of what will be studied in the chapter. I'd say some teachers like it, some teachers will skip it. But it's just kind of a bit of a grounder. And then primer questions, again, if you're into getting a bit of discussion going, you can use it. If you're not, I'd say you can skip it. But just a few general questions just to start people thinking about what might be coming up in it. They're not very deep at all. And I'm sure you can kind of add in your own alongside it. But they're just kind of to start it again if you kind of like engage them. But this is the big thing here. The learning outcomes then are named here, and then the whole chapter then is structured that way. So every chapter, the learning outcomes on the first page, and then the top of each page then whatever each learning outcome will be there. So you can see here, determine the factors that impact on the development of business ideas. So again, having reviewed the papers there, if you look at that, it's like determine the factors that impact on the development of business ideas. That there, in my eyes now, I haven't seen the papers, is crystal clear. Like that, that's what will be asked. Like that's the scope of this. When the student has engaged with this material here, what they need to be able to do at the end is determine the factors that will impact on business development. Okay. So when I was initially writing it, I put in like sources of business ideas, and it's a pretty solid place to start. Like, where do the ideas come from in the first place, in order to look at what will impact more of them. So say entrepreneurship would be impacted by the levels of delegation or the style of leadership. So that would impact on the level of entrepreneurship, and if the level of entrepreneurship is impacted, then it's going to impact on the amount of new ideas for the business. But it seems more likely though that this page here is just pretty much what they're gonna have to be able to do. So this learning outcome, I think, could be achieved just with this page, like factors that impact on idea development, the culture in the business, and then you talk about how leadership style, autocratic there, will limit idea generation. Like that's pretty much what we'll get you all the marks. That's all you really need to know. So I think based on that learning outcome, it's very, very clear that that's what they're interested in. So this page seems like exactly what they kind of need to study and know, like how much resources there are. Business need to allocate set time and money. Google famously give 20% free time to develop ideas, so they know. So idea development could be limited if a business lacks sufficient money. So if the outcome is what are the factors that impact on idea development, closing with what can impact, or why it limits idea development, is an excellent guiding principle. So I would say that page there is just a classic example of, when you look now at the learning outcome, that's what they need to know for that learning outcome, and there won't be that much more. So when I was saying that the course is probably much smaller than we felt it might be, and it felt like there was a lot added, I think when you look at the learning outcome and the sample papers, the learning outcome seems to be the question in almost every single case, are very, very tightly linked to it. So therefore, if this learning outcome is very specific to determine the factors that impact on development of business ideas, that's pretty much what we're likely to see, based on the sample papers anyway. Okay, and then the other thing then with this then is your design thinking. So I suppose just to show you here again that kind of split between content and research and stuff. So outline design thinking as an innovative approach to idea development. Okay, so that's covered here. That's your design thinking. So it's literally a half a page that came up there as one of your learning outcomes. So they need to know those 4 phases in a row, and they need to understand what happens in them. So like clarifying, when you gain a deep understanding of the problem. So it's problem focused and person focused. So it's solution focused. So the business should spend time checking what problems the person has, like the consumer has. So to clarify it. So they want to use your research, like observations and stuff, and then they want to use research to gather data and establish the problems faced by the users. That's the big big thing in your clarifying stage. So step 1 is figure out what people want, and use your research and do everything to get there. Step 2 then is ideate. So that's your brainstorming, and you come up with creative solutions to it. Okay, so it's person-centered and it's solution-centered. So you put the person first, the customer. What do they actually want? What's their problems? What do they need help with? How can you fix their problems? That's what design thinking is. And then when you know what their problem is, then you go about, how do I come up with creative solutions for it? Okay, and then with that, then you then develop it, and that's where you kind of turn it into prototypes. You get the working samples and so on, and then you use teamwork to explore how those solutions, how you can bring them to reality. And then we have implement, and that's testing prototypes and gathering feedback. And that's where it's an iterative process where you keep on making more and more prototypes and going back and forth. So this seems to be, like I was saying, the new idea generation, product screening, and that's it there. Like that seems to be, if they knew that, then they're going to be able to answer that question for it. Okay, and then what I've done then is, so that's your white space there. So that's the thing that they need to learn off. And then here we have our business in our world kind of interpretation of it. So looking at an actual business, so Airbnb, and just going through what they did with their design thinking process. And then over here as well, I did a case study on Apple, and kind of explained kind of how they went through the design thinking, and then gave an or here. So research real examples of brand using design thinking to create a new product, referred to how they were person-centered, solution-centered and iterative. So they're going to go and have to pick a different case study and go and find out information of where they did those things. And up here then, I answered the other part of this, appreciate how the process is iterative and solution and person-centered. And we have that kind of covered up here with it, iterative, trial and error and so on. So in that white space, like, we're answering this learning outcome really, really clearly. And in this section here, we're getting them to go and do some research. So I think that just works very well for that. Okay, and that's just another ABQ. I'll keep going with this. So outcome verbs, how to answer each. So, the state, explain, expand approach, or state, explain, relate approach that we used to, does it hold up? And I would say in lots of cases it probably does. I mean, I would see, having looked at this, I would see no reason to approach it too much differently to how we're approaching it at the moment. And I think similar, like I was looking at the junior cycle and senior cycle economics, because they've changed recently. I went through the marking schemes with them, and just to see if I could pick up anything from that's a recent adjustment. And it just seems like very much like junior cycle, that the students who do very well make sure that they don't just state something, they also expand it and go again. So it seems, I would imagine that'll be the way it is. Like at the moment, it's a word learning off competition, and you can do really well without understanding very much, because you can just learn off lots of words, where now it looks like with junior cycle business, there's a much greater variety of answers, and once it makes sense and is applied well and expanded, people seem to score very well. So I'd imagine that's how the approach they'll take with this. I'm sure there's certain things like your design thinking where you have to have certain things in, but generally I think once you develop stuff well and give reasons for why you're saying it where appropriate, like with explain and stuff, I think students will do well. Okay, so let's look at explain. Explain, give a detailed account including reasons or causes. Okay, so that there jumps out at me as just being something to note, including reasons or causes. Okay, so with explain, they've left more room. It's 5 or 6 lines versus outline where it seems to be 4, so you probably need a little bit more. Okay, so with explain, I would be saying state and explain, and then your reason or cause. So we kind of have our SEO type thing. So what do I mean by that? Explain 2 ways to ensure an effective appraisal process. Okay, so here again, this word is important. It's in the learning outcome, effective. So that just means like it's a benefit. Like if something's effective, it's a good thing. It works well. So like you're trying to explain how to get performance appraisal to be good. Okay, so you need to show something improving there. For me. So here we go with this then. State. So like how do you make appraisal more effective? So that's our human resource management. Sorry, yeah. So that's another topic. Like that is widely covered, but just it's kind of repackaged a little bit, like the impact of technology on it. Blended working is big in it, but we have our recruitment selection again, impact on technology of different stuff like that. So a lot of content that you'd be really comfortable with, and then it's just looking at how do we tweak it, or how do we apply it differently because of the way the learning outcome is set up. But let's have a look at this. Okay, provide regular feedback, not just once a year. So I would imagine, just to say there's 5 marks over it, I'd say a student might be good for 2 there, 1 or 2. I'd say definitely 2, just for stating that you're into your kind of pass level. Anyway, certainly just for picking that out. But then we want to explain it. So like, what do I mean by that? Appraisal should not be a once-off event, but part of continuous performance with ongoing feedback. Okay, so you're explaining what you've stated there like that. It should be regular feedback, not just once a year. So it shouldn't be once off. There should be continuous engagement with management. Okay, but we haven't said why that's effective yet. So this here, like whether or not there's additional marks for that, whether or not you could just merge them into one sentence. But it's this bit here that I think is important, the expand bit. And just to link back here, it's like the reasons or causes. So like we've explained how you could make it more effective, but we haven't explained the reasons or the thing that causes it to be more effective. And that's really what we're kind of looking at down here. It allows managers to recognize good work and address small issues early before they grow into bigger issues. So that there is a reason why it's more effective. And that there, I think, then would be in line very much with what they would look for with something like that. So explain seems to need a little bit more development, and you need to just include things like reasons or causes or stuff for it. Okay, and that seems slightly different to outline. So if we look at outline, it says there, give the main points, restrict to essential points of info. So it looks like you can play it a bit tighter there with that and just kind of stick to, that seems more like our kind of state and explain type thing. An outline seems to come up a good bit with importance when we look at questions. So here, outline the importance of Gráinne's relationship with her suppliers. So again, that might be more like, I mentioned it earlier, but like the importance of it. So increased quality goods, higher level quality goods from suppliers on time means that customers will get delivered a good of high quality, so satisfaction will be up and it'll help maintain sales. Stuff like that I would guess could be there. This would be a case where they know, like, we're not sure fully how much to give. You can see that there's 8 lines here, so I would imagine there might be 2 importances there potentially. Like, I don't know if you'd need to explain what a supplier is. It doesn't seem like that would be what the intention of this question is. It's just the importance of Gráinne's relationship with her supplier. So what does Gráinne get out of it? Or, like, why is it important for her? Like, what's important from her suppliers? Basically, like, the importance of them. And that's covered in the book anyway. So, like, how I laid out chapter 1 is who the stakeholder is, what they are and why they're important to a business. And then I've also mentioned their needs and wants, so that when you're dealing with the second learning outcome about conflict, how it arises, that you have their needs and wants compared to the business's needs and wants, so it could be easier to spot kind of those conflicts. Okay, and then we have evaluate. So evaluate, I suppose, then is the one then, like, how do we approach that? So based on the, like, last year's Leaving Cert, like, there was 2 evaluations within 4 points, so we're probably used to it being state and explain a few times and then one little evaluation at the end. I have a feeling that when you look at the breakdown in the spec, that evaluate means more like justify each point. I would be very much pushing students to make sure that for each point you give, that you're justifying it. If it's if it's looking for more points, like evaluate the Ireland's membership to the EU, I would say each point that you're talking about, I would be giving an opinion or justifying the importance of it within it, just based on that they've recently looked for more evaluations, not just one at the end. And it does seem like a deeper thing. Let's look at what it is here. Evaluate, collect and examine evidence to make judgments and appraisals. So that there looks like it's more to do with our project. Okay, so we won't be doing that. We won't be doing that in our written exam there. Describe how evidence supports or does not support a judgment. Again, I'd say that's probably more project based. So this here would be more what we're looking at. Identify the limitations of evidence in conclusions, or make judgments about the ideas, solutions, or methods. Sorry, it's actually that last one there that I meant to highlight more. Like, this here is what I think we're talking about when we look at evaluate. Make judgments about the ideas, solutions, or methods. Okay, so it's this making a judgment. So if we think at the moment for evaluation, we basically probably tell our students that you give an opinion and then you justify it. Okay, that's how you evaluate currently, and that's a really solid way to go. So you state what you think something does or the impact of something, and then you say, like, you give a reason to back up that, like to make it more believable, or you provide evidence to show that your opinion is based on something and it's not just an opinion. Okay, so the question here that was up in sample paper 2, evaluate how digital technologies have impacted the modern workplace. Okay, so I would say here, so and that's straight from the learning outcome again. For me, you would get a digital technology, you would mention something. So, like, I'd be mentioning something like Zoom or video conferencing. When digital technology is referenced in the question, I would be referencing it in the answer. And impacted, again, the modern workplace. So you have to reference that. So I think here what I would do is show the impact on the modern workplace. And then I'd reference a digital technology, and then I would try and evaluate what I've said. And where when we think about evaluate, I'm going to make a judgment about my proposed solution, or the proposed idea, or I'm going to try and identify the limitation of it, of what I've said. So, like, I think however could be a really useful thing to put in here. So let me show you kind of what I'm trying to say there. If we're talking about the impact on the workplace, okay, digital technologies have enabled more flexible and remote working arrangements. We have definitely talked about the impact on the workplace there. Okay, so that is the impact on the workplace. More remote work from home, etc. Okay. Now, the question had talked about how digital technology has done it, so I want to get our tech bit in here. So tools like Zoom or Teams or cloud-based systems allow employees to collaborate and access files from anywhere. So we're showing the impact we're showing how tech causes that impact, and then I suppose we're evaluating the impact, like, what does that actually do to the business? So people can have more flexible work. They can do that because of Zoom. What's the impact? Like, evaluate, like, come to a reason or make a judgment about it. Is this a good or a bad thing for business, or how does it impact the business? What does it affect? And this flexibility is improved work-life balance and reduced commuting time. Okay, so that'd be something that is the positiveness of it. And then you could say, however, it can also blur boundaries between work and personal life, or not all employees have good digital infrastructure. Or you might say, like, you could think about of the business, workers might be harder, or like productivity might drop because workers might be doing less at home, or might be distracted by other things when they're at home. Social interaction could suffer for people working at home who don't engage with colleagues in work, or maybe they don't miss them. But you could say that there's lower teamwork, or less clarity or understanding of different departments' work because people aren't mixing in a physical workplace anymore. So it's coming up with, I think what would be good here for your evaluation is to state what the impact is, and then give an however with it as well, where you're like, like, this is the good thing, however this is also the bad thing. So that you're kind of getting into this kind of limitation or judgment about it. So like you're providing evidence, like, because they are at home all the time, they don't mix with other team members, so there might be a lower bond between members, or less communication, or projects aren't collaborated on as well, or something. You're justifying it because of the work from home scenario. So that would be how I would envision encouraging my students to evaluate a question anyway, until we know more, just based on the spec. So yeah, I had just broken down and threw these in, like, just to kind of refer to it. But like the Genius for business recently, like, the big thing here that I noticed, like, this is one of those brilliant BST AI nights with Simone, I think, that I had done, and I was kind of marking up as I was listening. And like, here it's outlined 2 reasons why cultural enterprise is important in society. And I remember we were told then that make sure you link this bit in, and I suppose that's what I've been trying to show here tonight, like, in the workplace, for business development and growth, make sure that the students are really reading the question all the way to the end. And if you have to apply it to a certain situation, that everywhere in your answer you apply it to the certain situation. So like the factors that limit idea generation, or idea development, I think it was, make sure then that you get them, or we have them in the habit that this limits idea development because of XYZ as a last sentence. So I think that's kind of important. And then outline the big thing that kind of seemed to jump from all that was that, like, there was a lack of expansion kind of for the marks. And I know this is the younger kids at junior cycle, but at senior cycle I imagine we'll run into similar difficulties. Just making sure that they go the extra distance, they add a bit more expansion, they give the reason, they give the cause, so like, you're not just stuck just giving statements or outlining something. You're pushing them to then develop that and kind of back it up with opinion, or explain the reason and stuff behind it. That was the main kind of thing that I took, that I was saying about this. Similarly with here, like, why, how it's a benefit. So making sure you're expanding. If you're saying what a benefit is, say how the benefit comes about from something. Similar stuff to than we're used to here, but I just thought that might be helpful. There was also a recommend in here as well. So just to show you how I did that recommend thing earlier, recommend a suitable source of finance Coupon could use. So you give the source, and then you give the reason, and then you have to expand it, like why it is a suitable source. So that's kind of what I was saying there, what it is, how it works, and why it works would be, I think, a good way to go about recommending something. And then I think I just had the eco paper as well, but it kind of just a snippet from it. It was there anyway. So yeah, I think, like, I had thrown in a couple of other papers and questions to look at, but I think kind of have gotten through everything, kind of like that there is to cover. The other thing, just with it for research, if you were thinking of doing some research now, I think it's a great idea to use TY between Easter and summertime. I have a couple of worksheets here up on the workpack page. If you don't have access to that, there's links on Facebook, on the business teachers pages and stuff. I think I'd put up links there, or just email me for them. But I think they could be a really handy way. You could just trial run a bit of research. I think they're quite engaging, interesting stuff like dodgy boxes, Netflix account sharing, and kind of just get them to go and find different answers to stuff. What I was trying to do in it was get them to think about what an answer might be, and then get them to go and find data on what the answer is, so that there's a bit of like reflection in it. How has my opinion changed? One of the big things I think that'll be very strong for the project is like them showing that they have a point of view and that their point of view has changed in some way through the research. So getting them early into the idea of doing that and that being the norm, I think would be great. And I think like when the sample project spec comes out, like I was saying, like I was doing this tonight because I'm free to do it. Like, you know, I'm out of the classroom at the moment. Next year I'll be out of the classroom again. So when that comes out, I'll be really able to respond very quickly with it. And I think it'll give us a much clearer idea of, you know, how it's going to come up. And I think the specification is clear enough with what they should be doing in order to score well. I have these kind of 7 principles that I've done out that'll go in the activity book on, like, you know, kind of like a rubric of it, like, you know, if you do X, Y, and Z, you should end up doing pretty well based on it. And given the way the papers have been very closely linked to the learning outcomes, I think students who stick very closely to kind of, you know, the suggested higher scoring attributes or activities for your project will end up doing really, really well. And I think the course will end up being really a lot more enjoyable to teach, because students will be actually looking at articles in a meaningful way, because it'll matter. Where at the moment, like, you know, you can try and bring the class alive by bringing in lots of different examples and stuff, but ultimately they just need to go and learn off certain words to put down in certain places. So I think there'll be an adjustment period, but definitely I feel much better having seen the papers and looking at the learning outcomes, that they have them lined up so that what they're going to ask seems very clearly what they are asking. And I think that can settle us a lot in terms of what's coming, because if we just stick closely to them and follow those learning outcomes, I think then your students will be very enabled to do very well in the exams then based on that. And I think if the papers are similar enough with the project that it ties quite closely, I think then we can kind of cope with that as we go as well. But if you like this, yeah, like as I was saying, I suppose to make it feasible, so like I've really enjoyed kind of making resources great, hearing that they're going well, and then to make it feasible for me to be off and not work full time next year, so that I can kind of continue to do it. Like I lots of this, so when the project stuff comes out, like I'm sure I'll do an evening and share some stuff, but ultimately the main chunk of it will be shared on the digital platform just for back in business users. And probably unlike the traditional publishers where everyone can access all the PowerPoints and everything, you know, once you're a teacher, codes will only be given to schools that have it on their book list. And that's the only way I can make it feasible to be able to kind of go all in. And you know, so schools that use the book then will get access to it. There won't be any way to buy access or anything. Anyone who buys a copy of the book then just gets access to the student resources alongside it. So if you like this, you find it useful and you want loads more, and I'll be doing loads more all next year, then I suppose, yeah, check out the book, get on to me with any questions. It's on the list for schools, and you can just throw it on the book list, and any bookshop will be able to order it for you and fulfill it. So it doesn't matter, like, you know, I'll be printing it in June, but you can order it now. Bookshops have all the details. They'll get in touch with me, and then I'll just be giving it to them, and they'll when I distribute it to them, then they'll be able to send it to school. So that's totally normal. Like the bookshops will be doing orders all the way, like June, July and August, the whole time into the summer before the school year. When I have the copies available, if you just want to send me an email, if your school has signed up to it and I haven't been on to you, I'll be going through all the different book lists when they go up online and looking at it. But I will then send out teacher copies to any school who's on the book list, and I'll also then be getting in touch with all the schools that are using it to send out teacher codes and student codes before the summertime as well. So yeah, hopefully, and there's loads of like different content then online, but just get in touch with any questions with it. Hopefully this was useful. I think if nothing else anyway from it, you would have got maybe a better idea of how stuff was asked, and a good idea of how the book can kind of deal with it. And then I suppose you've got all this data and information in a real kind of easy collated place that you can refer to. So when you're teaching the next year, these will all be there. I'll have these all online anyway, and you'll be able to go back to them and use them. But these will be the basis then for all the end of chapter questions and all the approaching the exam questions and everything that goes with it. So anyway, at the end of last night then, I had some questions in. Another question was, when will digital resources be ready? So the priority now for me now is just going back and refining content and adjusting stuff. and then making those end of chapter questions, which will then make the rest of the activity book to go with the planner, and just get all that finalized. All that stuff then will be available in ebook version when it's done, so that'll be sometime in May, and then it'll be, the final proof will be done, and it'll be off to print at the start of June hopefully. And then from the start of June then I'll start adding up all the PowerPoints. I'll start with all the teacher resources first and the stuff that would be useful for planning, so schemes of work, PowerPoints, all that stuff gets added first, and then later throughout the summer then I'll continue to add it so it's all there and ready to go for the new year. Like later in the summer I'll leave like the on-demand videos for students because they won't need them, so the platform, it's being built at the moment. So if you have any suggestions as to what would be good, or you wanted any input into what resources are going to go on it, just get on as well. If there's certain things that you use in class and you love and you think it'd be brilliant for teachers and would be really useful, I'm all ears for all ideas, because I just want to kind of continuously generate resources so that you can just kind of like this. I wanted to do these sample papers so you don't have to go and do that then, because you're just flat out busy teaching, and you can just focus on enjoying teaching and being in the classroom, and then just having all the resources ready in one place. I think we're not short of sources of information everywhere, and it's just probably just having a place that you can go to where there's no friction and no thinking in it, that you just know there's going to be just quality stuff that you can print and use kind of ready to go. That's the whole idea kind of behind what I'm doing. So if you like this, put it on your book list and there'll be loads more of it. And other than that then, thanks a lot for watching, and I'd be mad interested in what you think of the papers as well. I do think generally overall it's positive, extremely positive to have them at this time of year, and I don't think we're heading into a case where we won't really have a clue of how to approach it or anything, certainly for the written paper, based on what we've seen there. I think in 2 years time, if they're anywhere close to that, anyone who's followed the learning outcomes should be in a really good spot for it. So I think generally very, very kind of good to get overall, and hopefully this has been useful for it anyway. So if it has, send it on to someone else, and you could get on and let us know what you think of them, or with any questions if you have any. Cool, thanks a lot.